Hello, Brubs. We're back with Call Me Crazy by Heche. And we are on chapter 4. Heaven on the Seventh. Called it Heaven on the Seventh, like it was a title of a song or something that we should know, but none of us did. It became clear that Dad was not paying any rent or mortgage or whatever he was supposed to be paying on our house in Ventnor. So we were moving again. Heaven was a condo building not far down the boardwalk from Ocean City Baptist. It was situated on the beach, so it was ritzy enough for Dad to call home. The first order on the agenda was planning Susan's wedding. I don't remember who Susan is. One night, we all got called down the hallway to our parents' bedroom. When we arrived, they were just hanging up the phone and had tears in their eyes. Susan had just gotten engaged. Oh, that's right. Susan was the sister that went to college. Susan had an on again, off again boyfriend all through college, whose name was Judson. He was tall and handsome and Christian and Swedish, and wanted to get a job that would pay him a lot of money once he graduated. He was perfect. We all approved of Judd, Mom and Dad especially. Susan was going to marry someone who would be rich and handsome, our family's two priorities. We wouldn't want to see the ring. We couldn't wait to see the ring, pardon. Susan was doing exactly what my parents wanted her to do, following their footsteps. We all pitched in with thoughts of what she could wear, who she who should be invited, and what roles we would all play. I was to be the flower girl, which I hated because it meant I was young. Abby was going to be a bridesmaid and Nathan a groomsman, something that made Judd a real sport. I don't know if Nathan wanted to be in the wedding, but Dad wanted it. So it was going to happen if Judd wanted Dad's approval. And who didn't want Dad's approval? Judd's parents were quite conservative, according to Susan, so she wanted to wear a dress that expressed her individuality and creativity. This is where Dad came into play. We set off to showrooms and antique boutiques, from the shores of the Atlantic to the ports of PA, to find Susan a dress that said all she wanted to say without scaring anybody away. Susan ended up in a dress with gold sequins from head to toe that was described to her as a mermaid's gown, worn, it was said, by a movie star in the 30s. Well, that sold us all. Dad loved the movies. I wanted to be in the movies, and Susan looked like a movie star. Surely she would sparkle and glisten as she walked down the aisle. And the dress, not being the virginal white, would cause enough of a near heart attack in Judd's conservative Swedish parents to let them know who was in charge. Dad must have borrowed money from one of his lovers in New York or convinced Judd's parents to pay for the wedding because it was gorgeous. White on white on white, the room was filled with glorious flowers and food and cake and rice, everything that a daughter would want. Susan looked so stunning in her gown, you could hardly find air in the room to breathe. Abby wore a creamy bridesmaid dress that Susan had picked from a store in New York, and I was wearing a lacy number that my mother's rich twin sister had pulled from her daughter's closet. Mom was in a complete Mother of the Bride ensemble, and it was also incredibly perfect. Everyone gasped when Susan walked down the aisle. She was such a vision in her glittery gown that as I stood in front of the church, I made a pact that I would wear her gown one day when I was married so I could be just like her. It only took a phone call a day later to realize that Susan didn't have it all like I had imagined that she had. She ran away the night of her wedding, but apparently changed her mind because she's still married to this day. I wasn't told the details of the story, but I wondered what had happened to make her run. I wondered why no one questioned what she was feeling, and then I remembered that no one ever asked what anyone was feeling in our family. She had gotten married in front of God and preacher and friends of friends, so I assumed there was no turning back. Susan's wedding happened around Thanksgiving, and so the next event was Christmas. She had made up with Judd, and the two of them were coming to the condo to celebrate with us. Judd had told Susan of a Swedish tradition called Santa Lucia, in which girls put wreaths of candles on their heads and serve coffee cake on Christmas morning. So Abby and I donned wreaths of fire to welcome the guy Susan had run away from into our family. The presents that year had a very specific intention. Abby and I opened gifts of gel like rouge and mascara and frosty blue eyes shadow. Mom and Dad had gotten it in their heads that we children could be making a living for the family if we spruced up our looks a little bit. Dad's exposure in the big city to fame and beauty had convinced him that his children would could also become commodities. He had heard of cattle calls for shows where children got discovered, and since we could sing, why not give it a shot? If Broadway musicals didn't call our name, surely we could have careers doing commercials. Soon, Abby and I didn't walk out of the house without full on, rouged up faces, and when we tried, we could be gently reminded that we looked a little better with a set of lashes that could be seen. After all, we were blonde and the hairs on our eyes were a bit hard to see. It didn't take long before we were standing in front of a photographer posing with pigtails. We each got a card of 3 pictures showing us in 3 different forms of identity. My card had me jumping in the air with a huge smile on my face in one corner, sitting on a box looking sexy in another, and staring seriously ahead in a bodysuit in another. In all the photos, I was fully made up. I was 9. Before you knew it, Mom had us enrolled in jazz class and voice lessons, but that only lasted a couple of sessions because we couldn't afford any more than that. One cast in a commercial or starring in a Broadway show, we would resume the class. Once cast in a commercial or starring in a Broadway show, we would resume the classes with our own money. I don't know when I realized that this whole dream of our fathers was retarded. Her words, not mine. Don't report me. Maybe it was when I was standing in a line around the block at an Annie cattle call in New York City. Or maybe it was after I didn't get a call back. But surely I felt retarded. I couldn't sing like a broad. I could sing a hymn in church where people loved it because they had no other options. It was after I didn't call my name off the list of callbacks that my father put his arm around my shoulder and said that with a little more practice, I might become something worth casting. Become something worth casting? Was that all he wanted? I dejectedly walked out of the theater feeling like a complete and utter loser. I was no Brooke, that was for sure, and I felt my father's disappointment. When we were walking down the street in silence, I wondered how I was going to tell my mother that I didn't get asked to return the next day. How was I going to tell her that they didn't want me? We had saved a lot of money for my bus ticket and had such high hopes that I would play an orphan, any orphan, and that's when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Excuse me. I turned around thinking that it was my father playing a trick, but it wasn't. It was a man in a black coat carrying a briefcase. Yes, can I help you? I was always so polite. You look like the exact kind of girl that we're looking for to be on the show, to tell the truth. Do you know that show? I didn't, but before I could say no or say so, my father piped in, Sure she does. What are you looking for? The man started describing the whole show they were doing, for which they needed someone to impersonate a girl who had been a friend of Amy Carter's and got to spend the night at the White House. The man thought that I looked like the right age and wanted to know if I could be interested in taking a meeting to see if I could lie well enough to fool people into thinking that it was me who had spent the night. Of course she'll take the meeting. Does she get paid for that kind of thing? If she's convincing enough that the people on the panel think it's her and not the real girl that visited, she will. Well, that's all it took for my dad to say yes. The next day we were sitting in the waiting room at whatever network To Tell the Truth was on. I was called into a room where a man sitting behind a desk asked me all sorts of questions to find out how well I could lie. I started giggling uncontrollably. I thought it was a super silly idea that I would pretend that I had been to the White House when I hadn't been. I don't know if I'm the right person for the job, mister. I don't know what made me so direct, but it would become a habit. But I have an entire family who can lie. Maybe you want them to do your show. I pulled out a postcard of our family in a picture perfect pose. My parents had the photographer who had taken our composite shots take a picture of the family and then turned it into postcards. I had one on me and pulled it out of my pocket. This is my family. I showed the picture to the man. My dad is in the waiting room, and the rest of us live in Ocean City, New Jersey. And if this job could possibly pay any of us any money, it would be greatly appreciated. I gave the man our phone number, and my father got a part, my mother got a part, and my brother got a part, all pretending to be people they weren't. It was a job made in heaven. Kitty Carlisle and one or two other celebs on the panel voted for members of my family, so each made a couple $100 and received a box of cleaning supplies from the sponsors. Who knew that cleaning supplies would be the way of our future? Gas and oil, ammonia and soil, similar. I don't know who came up with the idea, but soon our family had boxes of cleaning supplies everywhere. And I mean everywhere. The condo was piled high and ideas were on the fly. We were going to become rich by selling cleaning supplies supplied by this company called Amway. Amway's products were the absolute best, as described to us with big smiles by our mother and father. They're all natural and don't harm the environment. Since when did we care about the environment? I don't think I had ever heard the word before. What the heck is the environment? We're going to sell these products to make a lot of money to buy a house so that when my deal comes through next Tuesday, we'll have some money in the interim. Isn't it a swell idea, kids? And you're going to help. We were going to make money in a week. A deal is coming through next Tuesday. What? Who? If the deal is coming through next Tuesday, then why do we have to sell cleaning supplies? And besides, we're only kids. What business do we have selling things that won't harm something we've never heard of? We might have said, but most certainly didn't. Because before we knew it, we were sitting in front of a white board that looked like a chalkboard, was the size of a chalkboard, but was not a chalkboard. Look at this nifty magic marker board, kids. Isn't it neat? You can write on it with this. Dad wrote with a marker handed to him by my mother and erase it like this. Mom handed him an eraser that looked very much like a chalkboard eraser, but was not a chalkboard eraser. Isn't that neat? Look, I'll do it again. He did it again. Neat, right? Super neat, Dad. What's it for? Well, Mom was going to have to explain what it was for because Dad hadn't actually stayed in the room when it was described to the group of suckers that they were suckered into by some other people who had been suckered before them. Dad had had some gas and oil stuff to attend to, apparently, while Mom had stayed and listened. You see, when you start, you have this amount of detergent. She was drawing a graph and pointing to a line depicting the detergent. You are at the bottom level, like dirt. She grabbed for another color marker, but as soon as you sell all of this detergent, she circled the line, you climb to this level. She drew a line from the circle. This line was green. This means that you are at the emerald level and you get a bonus of more money. After the emerald level, you can get to the. She grabbed for a red marker and drew a line in a circle, ruby level, and get another money bonus. And after the ruby level, you get to the. Here came the blue marker, sapphire level, where you get another money bonus that's an even bigger bonus than the ruby level bonus. And after that, she kept drawing and circling and graphing like a madwoman. And then you get to the diamond level, where there is such a big money bonus that you can buy any car or house or yacht or diamond, ha ha ha, that you want. Squeak. Mom's octave also pitched when she was excited about something she didn't really know about. Dad starting supposed to be started. Dad started applauding and chimed to her squeak. And guess who the entertainment is for the next Go Diamond weekend? Squeak. Oh my God, no. This was not happening. Dad had signed us up to be the entertainment at the rally for this cockamamie. That's not. how you spell cockamamie, is it? Charade. Mom had plans to make red taffeta dresses for the girls and red taffeta shirts for the men, so we all looked like shiny window treatments. She had already bought the patterns. Isn't it exciting, kids? Can you hear it already? Dad started humming and Mom started humming, and next thing you knew, we were standing in front of thousands of people who were cheering, "Go, Diamond, go, Diamond, go, Diamond." All this in time to my father's fist pumping in the air like a painted fan at a football game after a touchdown. It was only when he felt the audience at their peak of frenzy that he slid onto the piano bench and pounded out the intro that was our cue. Go tell all your friends and join up today. We're going to be diamonds. Amway. Amway. Chapter 5. The house that Jack built. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. Mom and Dad should have listened to the wisdom of the lyrics they were singing each Sunday, because next we were moving into a house built on the sand. The walls that held our secrets were getting thinner and less sturdy. Our house was on stilts on the sand. Some guy, let's call him Jack, got it in his head that he could make a lot of money building cheaper than shit houses on the beach that basically balanced on four pilings jutting out of the sand. The ocean, being not quite far enough away, would crash under the house at high tide. Surely we were going out to sea, but did it have to be this literal? For our celebration of the move, we dressed ourselves in black shirts and jeans and headed to the jetty outside of our house to do another family photo. We were a year older after all and thought it would be nice to update our vanity. We posed with our blonde hair blowing in the ocean breeze and smiled like we were the Von Traps on holiday. My mom thought it would be clever to put a saying at the bottom of each card as a special little something that would make our postcard stand out from the other family postcards. How many family postcards have you seen? The picture that was decided on after much deliberation was a full body shot with all of us on a different rock looking out at the camera with salt glow expressions that said, "Hire us." The caption underneath read, "We'll see you on the ocean of the world." What that meant, who knows? Maybe she thought that there were some people like Jonah who were going to spit onto our shores. Your guess is as good as mine. So fist bump, we wanted to meet some people on the ocean, but didn't want a house on it for long. Dad had bigger and loftier ideas for where we would live once the deal comes through next Tuesday. The reason that the other deals hadn't come through on the other Tuesdays was because he was now working on an even bigger deal that made the other deals obsolete. The deal was going to be so very big that we were going to become millionaires instantly. Once millionaires, we would have to live like millionaires, so we needed to find a millionaire's house. It was my 12th birthday when we set off to go find our mansion. On one of Dad's business trips, he had visited a place called Scarsdale, New York, which is one, if not the richest suburbs outside of Manhattan. We piled into the car, excited as all get out at the possibility of living in a mansion the next week. We drove about 3 hours and arrived in truly the most mansion-filled place I'd ever seen. Dad had set it up with a realtor to show us around for part of the afternoon until our scheduled meeting at a boarding school that was, according to Dad, the most prestigious school in the world. And then he added, "We want you kids to have the best education that money can buy, don't we?" Well, who were we to say we didn't? The only problem with Dad's plan was that Nathan was now a junior in high school and didn't want to move for his senior year and leave all of his friends. If we waited a year, Abby would be a senior and it wouldn't be fair for her either. I was going to be in the ninth grade, so it wasn't as big an issue for me. Kids change schools for high school all the time, and you're thrilled at the prospect of going to one of the most prestigious schools money can buy, aren't you? Well, who was I to say that I wasn't? I wanted to live in one of these houses that we were going to see. Each one the realtor took us through seemed more impressive than the one before. We gooed and get God because who wouldn't goo and ga? There were houses with tennis courts and horse stables. We can have horses too, Abby. You always wanted to ride, haven't you? Well, now you'll be able to. That was really exciting, even though it was Abby that had wanted the horses. I now wanted horses too. Can I have a horse? Of course, you'll see. I'm going to make up for everything that you've lacked, kids. Just wait until next Tuesday. We couldn't wait. We traipsed through kitchens the size of our house and thought of the meals that we would cook in them. We picked out bedrooms that had tiled floors on their own bathrooms and watched ourselves bathing in them. We sat in living rooms and imagined parties filled with friends we didn't yet know, gossiping in them. It was fun, super fun. We could barely get enough of the fun. Which do you like best? We all drooled and debated. I like that one. No, I like the one before the rose garden. The rose garden? Since when are you a gardener? Since when we move into that house? We laughed and played and ran through the lawns of green until it was time for the appointment at the school. We politely told the realtor how sorry we were and we would love to see more, but we had an appointment to enroll us all in the school down the road. She was impressed and said nothing about it being one of the most of the most, being one of the most of the most, and we nodded our agreement. I don't know if that was intentional and said we would be in touch. We piled back into the car and started singing one of our all-time favorites. God is so good, God is so good, God is so good, he's so good to me. We drove down a long drive and through huge arches to the dean's office at this prestigious place, and Mom and Dad sang praises about what good kids we were. We were then led into a room down the hall where we sat to take enrollment tests, or IQ tests. Who knew which, and prayed that we would be smart enough to get in. When we finished taking the test, the nice dean took us on a tour of the school and we had dinner in the cafeteria. Mom and Dad were sure we would get in, and from the looks on Abby's and Nathan's faces, they were pretty ready to screw staying at Ocean City High. On the way back, we decided on a house. Everyone was allowed to have at least one of the things they really liked. So we put our likes in order of most important for us to be happy and said what we wanted most. 3 hours later, we had made our decision. The $3 million home would be purchased the second the deal came through. There's a place for us, a time and place for us. Hold my hand, and we're halfway there. Hold my hand, and I'll take you there somehow, someday, somewhere. Tuesday came and went and came and went and came and went. Suddenly, it was Christmas again. Abby made the decision to skip her junior year to graduate with Nathan so that she wouldn't have to move into the mansion when she was a senior. We'll find a new way of living. We'll find a way of forgiving somewhere. Susan and Judson had moved to Virginia so Judd could go to business school there. They had a new apartment we all wanted to see, so off we went for Christmas Day. Abby and I bought stuff for wreaths of candles, and that was to be our present to the family. By now, each of the kids had gotten jobs doing what they could do to help out. I worked at a greasy hamburger stand on the boardwalk, close to the house where I would sing Annie songs to attract the customers, so the audition wasn't all a loss. At the stand, I would ask the nice people what they would like, and if they wanted more music, then I would sing as I got them their fries or shake. Abby got a job waitressing. No restaurant served alcohol, so she didn't have to be 21. It wouldn't have mattered anyway, because she looked 21, or near to it, even though she was only 15. Nathan delivered papers, stacked papers, and stacked sandwiches at a local deli during the day, and worked at a boardwalk pizza joint at night. It was clear that this was not going to be a present giving Christmas when Dad took all of our money that month to travel to New York. Susan made wonderful coffee cake to serve for the fire presentation, and we all sat around talking about the house that we were going to move into in Scarsdale. I'm sorry it hasn't happened yet, kids, but it will. Until then, I got you this. Dad was pulling something out of his pockets that I hoped weren't more pictures of Brooke. I was not disappointed. Dad handed us each a sheet of yellow legal paper that had been folded into 3 sections and had our name written in red on the outside. We were instructed to open our letters all at the same time, read what it said, and then read them out loud to the group one by one. We all looked at each other and looked at the papers and then opened them. I didn't see the expressions on the others' faces because I was so excited by what mine said. Dad promised me a trip to Russia. Oh my God, I'm going to go to Russia. I jumped up and hugged my dad as hard as I could. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you. Thank you for my trip to Russia. Everyone laughed and cheered for my dream coming true, and then proceeded to read the gifts out loud from their letters. We had all been promised the things that we most wanted. Nathan got flying lessons, Abby a horse, Susan and Judd a new house, and Mom a cruise around the world. We were beside ourselves. It was so sweet and so thoughtful and so in the spirit of Christmas that we didn't even mind it when he said, "And it's all going to happen after next Tuesday." Susan put on a Lionel Richie album, and Dad held out his hand for my mother to dance. We celebrated our Christmas with tears in our eyes as we watched the two of them spin across the floor. It would be the last time we saw our parents embrace. The phone got turned off, which should have been a sign, but we were always optimistic. There was a payphone that we used as our house phone on the boardwalk, and we would leave the door open to see if we could hear it over the crashing waves. Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we had a hard time explaining why we couldn't shut the window to the people on the other end of the line when the noise of the waves was too loud for us to hear what they were saying, and we would have to ask them to yell. One day after school, it would sink in that we didn't have to worry about paying the phone bills anymore because there was no phone. No phone and no house either. I had about a 3-block walk from the bus stop home, and when I got to the end of the block, closest to the house, I saw my family gathered on the steps leading up to the door. I figured we had been locked out, and I was right. So locked out we wouldn't be allowed in again. Jack had had the locks changed and the door boarded up with yellow tape and signs reading "Keep Out" and "No Admittance," like our house was a crime scene. And it was, really, without much explanation from Dad. We were ushered into a borrowed Cadillac that was in the driveway, just waiting to take us someplace we did not yet know. There was complete silence until we arrived at someone's door in Atlantic City. It was dark, and I don't know if he woke this man up, but there was arguing and confusion and more arguing before Dad had a set of keys in his hand and was driving us someplace else. Apparently, Dad had convinced the man he had been speaking to give him the keys to a house that the man was selling. He was a realtor whom Dad had known from his past or present, and was his lover or not his lover. Somehow he was connected to him enough to trust my father in a house that belonged to neither of them. We needed a place to stay for the night, to say the least, so we pulled up to the stranger's home, parked in the driveway, and loaded into the house. In hushed tones, we were instructed to find bedrooms, as if the walls were going to hold the sound of our voices and tell the owners the next day that we had been there. We, this family of 5, spent the night in a person's house whom we did not know and were most definitely never going to meet. We slept with our eyes open, wondering what in God's name was going to happen to us next. And that's going to be it for now, brubs, unless you pay me $16 million and I will keep reading. Otherwise, I got to go to work. Guten